Pat McAfee and the Pat McAfee Show are set to become the highest paid media entity or personality in the history of ESPN, and he did it by capitalizing on one key factor. So Pat McAfee has been breaking barriers, changing the media landscape ever since he stepped into it after finishing his career with the Indianapolis Colts as a punter. I mean, this guy started the Pat McAfee Show, had deals with, I think, FanDuel. He's had deals with some betting companies. And then, he's been independent, and he eventually signed with ESPN a couple of years ago. And it has just been off to the races since then. Their entire show is not on ESPN, but much of their show is on ESPN. But I think the biggest thing that, this shows is that shows like Gil's Arena, who now has been rebranded to the Arena. If you guys haven't been keeping touch with that, I would tell you guys to do some research on that. But Gil's Arena is currently in a contract dispute with Underdog, and he's trying to get the show, and there's a whole host of things like that. But
Gil, I ain't on Gil's Arena no more. I am on Gil's Arena. That ain't Gil's Arena. that is not Gil's Arena. That's whatever that is. That's all right. Yeah. I told Nick to tell them, hey, call it whatever you want. Just don't call it. Don't be doing no wild shit using my name. Right? I almost called, hey man, I almost called Josiah. Did some shit happen one of them episodes. I like, hey, wait, hold on. Don't be doing that shit under my name. No, not under my name, goddammit. I almost did one of those, but I had to hold back. Y'all.
Gilbert Arenas started a show called Gil's Arena, which was bought out by Underdog, and he owned 50% of it, and that's similar to what Pat McAfee did. I mean, Pat McAfee is the blueprint for what we are seeing in sports media today. He had his own brand, started his own show, licensed it out to a media company, and it is where we are today. I mean, I think saying that Pat McAfee broke barriers is an understatement. This man has set the blueprint for what future media companies are going to be using for years and years on. I mean, you think about what the Volume Sports, what their whole brand is about. They are basically a licensing company. They license shows. They will buy your show, and maybe you may still own the brand name. You may still own the IP. You may still own all of that, but they are going to sell the advertising for you, and they are going to pay you a licensing fee to have your show be under their umbrella. And they get to keep a lot of the advertising dollars and all of those things. But the business is moving in this direction where you have a show, you bring the audience, we bring the name brand. That is what Pat McAfee has done with ESPN. You bring the Pat McAfee Show. You bring the name brand, you bring the audience. We have ESPN, who also has an audience, but I'm sure a lot of the people who were watching ESPN were already watching the Pat McAfee Show. What it does for ESPN is now we have this long slot from, I think it's 10 to 12 p.m. every day, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. every day on Eastern Standard Time, that they get to sell out a bunch of advertising that ups their views at ESPN, and it just looks good for the ESPN brand. I mean, what Pat McAfee is doing is absolutely insane. Well, he's currently in negotiations with ESPN to potentially sign a $60 million deal with ESPN, and a lot of people may see that number and think immediately, oh my gosh, Pat McAfee is about to sign a $60 million deal. Well, not necessarily. Pat McAfee and the Pat McAfee Show are set to sign a $60 million ESPN brand, and Awful Announcing did some good reporting on this, and let's see what they had to say about this. To put it into perspective, First Take star Stephen A. Smith nets about $20 million per year from ESPN. So this is just trying to set the stage of how much money Pat McAfee, the Pat McAfee Show, and Pat McAfee himself are going to be paid, and they're going to talk about a little bit about how much Pat McAfee gets paid from ESPN currently, and what he's going to be paid with this potential new $60 million deal. First Takes Stephen A. Smith makes $20 million per year for himself to work at ESPN. Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, earn about $15 million and $17.5 million respectively. Suffice it to say, McAfee already finds himself in the upper echelons of ESPN talent salaries. Now he's prepared to blow everyone out of the water, at least to a point. Now, what do they mean by that? So up here they talk about it's a huge step up from where McAfee currently sits. ESPN licenses, and mind you, I'm talking about licensing deals. A lot of people always talk about ownership. Pat McAfee is a pioneer in this regard as well, because I don't think a lot of people were doing this before Pat McAfee was in the media business. Pat McAfee owns the Pat McAfee Show. Pat McAfee licenses out his show so that, and people pay him a licensing fee. So what they're saying here is it's a huge step up from where McAfee currently sits. ESPN licenses his show for a reported $17 million per year, and then pays McAfee an additional $13 million or so for his work on College Game Day, various altcasts, and other ancillary assignments. So one thing I wonder is, I feel like the licensing numbers of $17 million for a show, that goes towards the Pat McAfee show. But when you're talking about College Game Day, that's not necessarily the Pat McAfee show. So they're paying him $13 million. That seems like his individual number that they pay him. He's getting paid $13 million. And if you compare that with what Stephen A. Smith is making, $20 million, and then you think about Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, the color commentator and the analyst, they make $15 million and $17 million respectively. So that $13 million would fit around in between, maybe, well, below some of the biggest names at ESPN. Stephen A. Smith, the biggest name at ESPN, and then Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, obviously big names in the football stratosphere, which is the biggest entity in ESPN football. Football runs the world. So Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, I keep wanting to switch their names around, are some of the highest paid. But that $60 million number, and so the licensing fee, let's get back on this licensing fee, this licensing agreement. He licenses the show. So like I was saying with the volume, like I was saying with what Pat McAfee, like I was saying with a ton of other shows that are now picking up this type of blueprint is, hey, you license our show, you pay us a licensing fee, and everything is happy, so happy lucky. But at the end of the day, instead of ESPN then owning the Pat McAfee show, instead of a situation like what Gilbert Arenas is now in, where Underdog now owns his brand name, Underdog now owns his show.
So the channel, not the show. There's a channel. I think people usually purposely not hear. I think I said this like a couple months ago that my contract is up this year, and then after my contract's up, I will own the name of my show. I thought I said that, and I think they purposely, nobody wanted to listen. I did 50-50 ownerships to get the foundation because I had no idea what it took to run shows. So now I understand how to run shows. So I don't need to do 50-50s no more. That's it. There's nothing, it's called growth. If I got fired, I got fired with 100%. It don't matter. It don't matter what you say. Just understand. 100. 100.
Pat McAfee, owns the show, owns the IP, owns everything, and we license it out to you. So within a licensing agreement, basically, hey, we can license out the advertising rights. Maybe we can license out distribution, which is what they seem to be doing. We're licensing out a portion of our distribution to ESPN, because if you guys do watch the Pat McAfee show, I think the first 2 hours or maybe an hour, I'm pretty sure that 10 to 12 window is where it's on ESPN. But if you notice, Pat McAfee show is a 3-hour show. It goes from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern time. I believe so. So I think that would be 12 to 2 on. I don't know exactly the times, but I think it's a 3-hour show, because on their thing it says 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern time-ish, Eastern-ish, 3 p.m.-ish, or something like that. So basically, they license out the distribution for 2 hours of the Pat McAfee show, and then the last hour is still on YouTube, like it usually always is. The whole show is on YouTube, but then the first 2 hours of the show are on ESPN, and I think that's what gives them that's what. And another thing with the licensing agreement, another thing with what the partnership that they have with ESPN, it gives them the liberty to have like Dan Orlovsky and like Adam Schefter, because if you remember, I think before the ESPN agreement, I don't think they had Dan Orlovsky on often. I don't know if they had, maybe they did, and maybe I'm off base a little bit here, but I don't know if they had Adam Schefter and Dan Orlovsky on as much as they do. I know now Adam Schefter is a mainstay. I know now Dan Orlovsky is a mainstay. I know before they had Ian Rappaport on pretty often. I'm sure they still probably have Ian Rappaport on, but Pat McAfee show is such a big name brand. It would behoove any entity to keep their people from going up there, because it's just going to grow your brand in itself. But so when they say Pat McAfee is going to sign a $60 million deal, that means for his whole show. So they talked about this in Awful Announcing, and really good reporting from Awful Announcing. The Pat McAfee situation is unique compared to normal talent contracts. ESPN licenses the Pat McAfee show, and the licensing fee is used to compensate the entire production team, from McAfee's fellow on-air talents to the staffers who handle the show's audio. So to say McAfee himself is prepared to sign a $60 million per year contract is a bit misleading, since much of that money funds the show. Which, that in mind, we're not going to get into all of that. But yes, $60 million is the big number. And I think it was reported that, Peyton Manning and Omaha Productions are also reportedly in the neighborhood of Pat McAfee's $60 million deal. I'm sure that's similar to what the Pat McAfee show is making. So Peyton Manning's Omaha Productions reportedly in the neighborhood of Pat McAfee's looming $60 million salary. ESPN never managed to lure Peyton Manning as its top NFL game analyst after years of aggressive pursuit, but the network's production deal with Manning and Omaha Productions has become far more expansive than a traditional announcer contract. So what are they meaning with that? Well, obviously, Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, and Omaha Productions are the ones who produce the ESPN altcast on Monday Night Football, which with Eli Manning and Peyton Manning, where they have a bunch of guests on and they do their show every Monday during the football season. I'm sure Omaha Productions produces a bunch of other, I think like E60s and 30 for 30s for ESPN Productions. It's basically a partnership. You got this production company, and obviously Peyton Manning and Eli Manning, you guys are a part of it. But once again, this is a way for Peyton Manning, Eli Manning, thinking back to the Pat McAfee show, for them to keep ownership. We own the brand. We own Omaha Productions. We own everything. We are going to license out our brand to you and allow you to use the video that we produce. Allow you to use me and Eli as talent. But we are talent of Omaha Productions that licenses out our Omaha Productions to ESPN. We are not ESPN talent. There's a little difference there. Although, the branding, they do partner branding, because Omaha Productions is behind the scenes. It's the cameras. It's the producers. It's all the things that Eli and Peyton Manning of Omaha Productions pay for by way of ESPN using all of those producers and all of that stuff. So it can get convoluted, but it's a way to own the brand. It's a way to keep ownership. As reports swirl that Pat McAfee negotiated a new contract with the worldwide leader worth as much as $60 million annually, new details of the lucrative Omaha ESPN partnership has also emerged. In an episode of his Marchand sports media podcast, The Athletic's Andrew Marchand added context to reports of McAfee's talk with ESPN, revealed that the network already pays Omaha a figure in the range of McAfee's looming payday. The info shows just how strongly ESPN has invested in its long-term deal with Omaha, which produces podcasts and digital series of the network, which also, man, these guys are playing with big-time money. These guys are doing a lot of big things, and yeah.
And now this one, which is not completed yet, but is for $60 to $65 million per year. Now, ESPN, they'll say the big difference is a production deal, not just a straight deal. And I think Peyton Manning's in that neighborhood too. We don't know Peyton Manning's exact numbers, but he's high up there with Omaha Productions. They're getting a lot of money. The money's crazy. I mean, it's crazy money.
Basically, what this video is about, Pat McAfee, Peyton Manning, Eli Manning. It's so funny how Peyton Manning and Pat McAfee were actually teammates with the Colts. Nonetheless, Pat McAfee, Peyton Manning, Eli Manning are some of the people who are setting the blueprint for how sports media is going to be done going forward. You own your brand. You own your audience. You own your podcast. You own all of that. You license it out to another brand. There's a ton of other podcasts. If you guys watch $1 Million Worth of Game, Wallow and Gilly are always talking about this. Ownership. We own the brand. We own the entity. We are going to license it out to somebody else. This is where things are moving. This is how things are done in the media landscape today. If you haven't gotten up on this, you need to certainly get up on this. But Pat McAfee is just going to keep breaking through. And the more he breaks through, the more he sets a stage for people in the media industry. Like, I know you've been seeing like On3, they've been buying some shows like 247 Sports just partnered with AYS Sports. Joe DeLeon, who's covered Hack City, who's part of the Hack City podcast. It's very confusing if you're not tapped in, but AYS Sports, they cover LSU, but then they have a show, it's called Joe and Ruffino. The Joe and Ruffino show, they just got, I don't know what kind, I don't know any of the details of their agreement, but they are now under the 247 Sports umbrella. And I would not be surprised if it wasn't in a licensing agreement like what you see with Pat McAfee, like what you see with Omaha Sports, obviously on a much smaller scale. But I think all of the media companies are noticing, hey, instead of having people who necessarily work for 247 Sports, yeah, technically they're going to be 247 Sports entities, or they're going to be whatever entity, a Fox entity, they're going to be an entity of our company. Let's let them bring their already established audience. Let's let them bring them their already established show. Let's let them bring their already established, they got time set up for when they do their show. They have production, they handle production themselves. We don't have to pay for any of that. All we have to do is find sponsors for their show. All we have to do is sell the show. And that takes a lot of the overhead away from these companies, and it allows to put the overhead and the money, a lot of the money into advertising, which is what is going to bring in the dollars at the end of the day. So, hey, we hire 1, 2, 3 salespeople to just, hey, your job is to go, this is one of the shows in your portfolio, and you're just going to sell this show. So you're just going to go around and call in these companies, and you're just going to try to sell this show. That's the only job that you have to do. And we do a 50-50 rev share. I'm just guessing. We do a 50-50 rev share split with this company, and we're going to split the funds. Like, that's how it works. And maybe we pay them a licensing fee to where they make 60 to 100,000 a year. The numbers for the big talking heads are much bigger, but maybe for 247 Sports, for these two guys who are on a smaller scale, hey, we pay them a fee that allows them to do this full time, but we are also going to sell their show. So we make money, and they make money on the advertising side of things as well. That is where things are moving to. So if you're watching this and you're in the media business and you're learning, you're trying to figure out where things are headed, this is where things are headed. This is where your mind needs to be at. I would brush up on the Gilbert Arenas situation. I would brush up on what Gilly and Wallow do with $1 million worth of game with Barstool Sports. Barstool Sports, I think, has been an entity who has done this for a while. They see somebody who has a show, and maybe, a lot of times, sometimes, like, these companies know what they're doing as well. So if they can own the entity, they want to own it. They don't want to license it out. But if somebody comes to the table understanding, what they're worth. Now, sometimes, if you're not a big name, maybe, and maybe if you don't have a big enough name brand, or maybe you don't want to own the entity, maybe you want to license, maybe you want to sell it to somebody else. But one thing that's always weird about that is, like, take Gil's Arena, for instance. His name is in the they changed it to the Arena for a reason. It was Gil's Arena. Now it's the Arena, because you can't have Gil's Arena in the name, because Gilbert Arenas is the guy who started Gil's Arena. For things like that, I feel like it may hurt the brand, and you might just want to change the name and altogether. That's why sometimes owning the namesake, owning the show itself might not work for you, because a lot of that audience may be attached to who the main person is. Like the Pat McAfee show, if you take Pat McAfee off the Pat McAfee show, would the Pat McAfee show still be the same? If you take Peyton and Manning and Eli Manning off of the Manning cast, it would not be the same. If you take Gilbert Arenas off Gil's Arena, it is no longer Gil's Arena. It has to be the Arena. It can't be Gil's Arena, because Gil is not a part of it's not a part of the Arena. So, I would say brush up on all of this. There's a lot going on in the media business. There's a lot that's changing, ever changing, and it's good changes. It's good changes. If you're able to build a show, if you're able to have an audience, if you're able to do this full time, there's somebody who is probably willing to pay you to sell your show for you. But certainly that comes with time. Certainly that comes with understanding. Certainly that comes with a team who, a production team, being able to put together a show, being able to have all that already set up so that a brand can just go, hey, we'll sell your show for you. Come work for us. Come have your show be under our umbrella, so that our audience grows, your viewership, all of that stuff. It's all good. You guys let me know what you guys think about this type of content in the comment section down below. I appreciate you guys tapping in, and I will catch you guys next time. See you later.